Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
There's so many to choose from. I don't know if I have a favorite one.
Well, if I put a gun to your fucking head, what would you choose?
Well, that escalated pretty quickly. Well, I, I, I don't know.
You gotta make a fucking choice.
Listen, asshole.
No, you listen, you little dick. You got a Scream Review series to do, and you better get it out before the new one comes out, or I'll gut you like a fish. Do you understand?
Alright, Horror Hounds, and welcome to another episode of This Just In. Today we're going to be breaking down the 1996 movie Scream. Well, as most of you know by now, Scream was a pretty decent movie back in its day. They were going up to the sixth movie coming out this year. Scream was very important. It revitalized the entire horror genre in a sense. The slashers of the 80s were kind of dying off. And this brought new life and new light to the slasher genre, which was very much needed. It kind of took some referential humor. It took things that we loved, and it took the whole tropes of horror movies, and it threw them in there. It kind of poked fun at them, but not in a too silly kind of a way. It was like that perfect balance. This movie had good comedy in it to go along with the scares. And some of the kills in this movie were very, very good. Some were kind of meh. But overall, what is there to say about Scream? I mean, like I said, it changed the entire genre. But we're going to take a stab, no pun intended, at it, and see if we can go through this movie, give it a rating at the end, and kind of just, as we go through it, have some fun, talk about the good parts, see if we get through some bad parts, and what happens. Alright, so the movie starts off with a phone call for Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore, who was the biggest star of this movie. They marketed the shit out of Drew Barrymore being in this movie, so everybody would come see it. So she gets a phone call, just another man on the phone, kind of flirtatious back and forth. They talk about scary movies, things like that. And then eventually it starts to turn darker. And then it gets to where it's really dark. She eventually finds out that he wants to see what her insides look like. It's pretty good. Pretty good opening. Thrilling. It's got kind of that hold you, grab your attention type of thing going on. And she finds out that her boyfriend is tied up in a chair outside. So they're going to play a little game. And he makes it easy on her. He asks her who the killer of Halloween was, because she said it's her favorite movie. And she's all distraught, and eventually she says Michael Myers. So then it's time for the real question. And everybody who grew up and saw this movie knows that they ask their friends the same exact question. And that's, who's the killer in Friday the 13th? And she runs on with Jason automatically, knowing that's just wrong. Pam Voorhees, Jason's mom, was the killer in the first one. Which is, I'm assuming, kind of an homage, because that was also kind of like a whodunit. Sort of. Like, you wouldn't have been able to guess Pamela Voorhees by watching that movie, like you can this one being a whodunit. But, anyways, we end up seeing Steve die. He's kind of slit right across the stomach, and his insides pour out. So that lets us know this is going to be a nice bloody good time. So then he asks her one more question, because they're not finished yet. And he wants her to guess which door he's at. He ends up smashing through the patio, and she ends up kind of running outside. This is nice back and forth. You can see him running through the house and stuff like that. Eventually, he pops up in front of a window, spins around, sees her. She punches him with a phone, and she's now still running, carrying this cordless phone. Then it turns into a nice slow motion move. If you haven't seen this movie, you still probably know this kill because it's been mocked and mimicked and done over and over again. If you guys remember, Scary Movie came out. It was a complete spoof on Scream and other movies, and as long as horror movies kept being made, they kept making spoofs. This kill was also kind of mimicked in the new Fear Street that came out like a year or two ago on Netflix. The very first one, it was like 1994, maybe? I could be wrong on the year, but it was in the first Fear Street movie. And he comes around, he stabs her in the chest. She falls to the ground. She kicks him. He ends up getting back on top of her, chokes her a little bit. She ends up pulling off of him again a little bit. But we see her pull the mask. We don't see who the killer is, letting us know this is going to be a whodunit. And he stabs her multiple times. And her parents come home. They're looking all over for her. They go to call the police. They can hear her dying and getting stabbed. And the mom goes outside to see where she is, or to go down to the neighbor's house to call the police. And she sees her daughter hanging from a tree. Inside's all cut out, hanging on the outside. And that's how the movie kicks off. So, the main actress that we all thought we were going to see, dead. Subvert your expectations. And that's what makes Scream so good, is because things that you would expect to happen don't always happen. Sometimes they do, which also makes it so when they don't happen, it kind of seems more surprising. Another thing about the movie that's also good is that it has a good balance of horror with comedy. So we jump right from that scene to Sidney in her bedroom. Billy sneaks up in the back window, which is her boyfriend, and he makes her scream. Her dad comes running upstairs, and he can't open the door because the closet door magically blocks the door from opening, which is a weird setup, but hey, he can't get in the room. He's looking around to see where they were screaming. She said she didn't scream. And then as her dad tells her that he's going to leave for a trip, he leaves, goes out the door, and we see Billy hold up like a little, I think it's like a tiger. He's like, oh, close call. So it's one of those, like, where you get a balance in there. And he's talking about how he was watching The Exorcist and all the good parts were cut out. Kind of like their relationship, how all the good parts have been cut out ever since her mom died. And he was hoping to kind of do some on top of the clothes stuff. And she says okay. But then his hand goes up the leg towards the butt. And she pushes him away. She ain't going to be doing that. She's not breaking that rule yet. And she does settle for PG-13 and flashes him. So once we leave that, we go to the next day. And she's coming to school. She meets her friend Tatum, and there's reporters and everything everywhere. And find out that 2 fellow students were murdered. So they do some investigations, and when they bring Sidney in for the investigation, we get to meet Principal Himbry, which was, he plays a smallish role in it, but hey, it is what it is. Henry Winkler does a great job for what he does. And we see Deputy Dewey, who is the most goofiest, serious cop ever. I don't know. He plays his role great. It's played by David Arquette. He does a great job. He was supposed to be one of the teenage kids, but he decided he'd rather have that role. And why does he want that role? Because he gets to hang out with Gale Weathers, which was played by Courtney Cox. So, once that's done, the little investigation, we don't get to hear any of the questions, but Sidney goes home. She's waiting for Tatum to get out of work. She wakes up from a nap. Ghostface calls her on the phone. She's having a back and forth because she's not believing any of this shit. But eventually she does get attacked by Ghostface, and she runs up the stairs just like she said those idiots in movies do. But the only advantage she has is she shuts her door, then she shuts that closet door. So when the killer tries to come in, that door blocks him from coming in. She uses her computer to dial 911, and the killer runs away. Billy comes in, and he drops his cell phone. So he's automatically a suspect. And she runs away, heads downstairs, and when she opens the front door, there is a Ghostface mask being held by Deputy Dewey, and they both scream. So they arrest Billy, take him down to the station. He's pleading that he didn't do it, and he's telling Sidney he didn't do it. They end up leaving, and they go out the back, and Gale Weathers, who is writing a book about how Sidney falsely identified Cotton Weary as the person who raped and murdered her mother. She tries to get a story from her. They have a little back and forth about this book because Sidney's pissed. And Gail says she'll send her a copy, and she punches her in the face. So we go back to Tatum's bedroom. They're joking about it. They get a phone call. It's the killer calling Sydney, tormenting her on how she got the wrong guy yet again. And Dewey goes to answer the phone, and there's nobody there. So we go to school the next day, and there's people running around in costumes of Ghostface now, terrorizing the halls just because it's fucking funny. And if you went to school this time, you would realize this is exactly what would happen if you were in school. And sadly, it's probably what will happen still today if kids went to school and this type of thing was taking place. Sydney runs into Billy. Billy says that, I'm innocent. They tracked my phone. That's why they let me go. None of the calls came from me. She still seems a little nervous of him. He's kind of pissy because he can't get laid, which I don't know how getting laid on the 1-year anniversary of her mom's death is like a thing to go for here, but Billy's not the brightest. So she ends up going in the bathroom. She sneaks into a stall. She hears some girls talking shit about her, how she's faking it. She's probably the one doing the murders herself. They leave, and then Ghostface sneaks out and does like a slight little grab at her. Falls into a sink. And she runs away. And we find out school's canceled due to the recent events. So Stu decides he's going to plan a party at his house to celebrate these murders that have canceled school. He's just looking to have fun with his friends. Nice part is Stu's played by Matthew Lillard, and he does play this character very well. He's the lighthearted, funny guy of the group. He's always bringing more energy and stuff like that to the role. And it's a very nice balance to go with all of the serious tones that are happening most of this movie. From there, we go back to Principal Hembry. He's hearing some things. He's looking around and not finding anybody. He opens up one door to yell at these little shits. And we see Wes Craven dressed up as Freddy Krueger and is a janitor. And he literally goes, "Not you, Fred." So, nice little Wes Craven reference to Freddy Krueger, the first real slasher movie that put him on the map. Even though he had some other good movies like The Hills Have Eyes, and he did Last House on the Left. So he did a lot of good horror movies prior to that, but Freddy Krueger was kind of what blew him up as being a great director in people's eyes. So Hembry turns around, goes back in his office, he goes to shut his door, and he is killed by Ghostface, stabbed multiple times. So we leave there and we go to the movie store where Randy works. Randy Meeks is the last person in this group of friends because you got Sydney, Billy, Stu, Tatum, and Randy. Randy's the one who is a movie enthusiast, and he's talking with Stu, and he's saying how he still thinks that Billy is the killer. And Stu's like, well, they let him go. Why would they let him go if he's the killer? Obviously, he's not. And Stu's saying how he thinks maybe it's Sydney's dad just going crazy 1 year after his wife was murdered. So they're going back and forth, talking about it, and then Billy comes in and creepily as fuck kind of gets in Randy's face. Kind of tells Randy that maybe he's the one killing all these people because his movie-going mind has just gone fucked up crazy. And we see Stu behind him flicking his earlobe with a really creepy look on his face. Weird. Just an overall weird scene. And then when Billy goes away, Randy looks right at Stu and goes, "And you're telling me he's not a killer?" So then now we're going to be heading to the kind of the crescendo of the movie. It all takes place at Stu's house here. And this part always throws me off because I know this movie's like 2 hours long, but like the last hour takes place at Stu's house. So the whole final act is half of the movie, essentially. But there's people partying and drinking, and then we got Gale Weathers shows up with Dewey. They're kind of joking with the kids, and Gale stuffs a camera in the living room right above the TV so she can watch what's going on at the party. Kind of get some footage, whatever else she might need for her story. So she goes back to the car where they find out there's a 30-second delay between what's happening on the camera and what they're seeing in the van. So, good thing they're not airing it live because they would not know if something bad were to show up and they'd have to stop it. But there's kind of the people having fun at the party, this and that, and they're joking around. Tatum goes to go get more beer in the fridge in the garage, and when she goes to come back in, Ghostface is there. And she thinks it's just somebody playing a prank, being a dick. And she kind of jokes with him that she wants to be the damsel in distress, and he slices her arm, so she knows this shit's real. She ends up trying to run away. He chases after her. She smashes him with a refrigerator door. She throws beer bottles at him. She flips him over her back, kind of like a fireman's carry in wrestling. And he crashes into stairs. And that's one thing I kind of enjoy about the Ghostface Killer, is with most of our killers, they're all, I don't know if I want to say like smart, because they're not, obviously, but they all kind of have like a stoic walk or a chase. All this stuff, it's just kind of like precise. You can't stop them. They're on a killing mission. And with Ghostface, he flips over people, he fucking trips, he gets hit, he gets kicked in the nuts. Like, everything happens in this movie to this poor killer. I know, poor killer. But it makes it more realistic as to, okay, if somebody's dressed in this outfit, this shit would happen. Like, somebody would be able to get the one over on them or make them slip and fall. Shit like that would actually happen. So it does. And it makes it more believable. But she ends up trying to escape through the cat door in the garage. And what I like to call like one of the dumbest kills ever. And doing like research and this and that on this movie, finding out that that's not how it was supposed to look. But the MPAA kept throwing fits over and over again about how this looked. So we wound up getting what we got. It goes up, crushes her head to the side, and looks like a doll. Like, it doesn't look realistic at all. It's probably the most pathetic kill in the entire movie, which is sad because I had great expectations, but that lovely MPAA does not like horror movies. So we go back to the party scene. Some people start leaving, this and that, and then Billy shows up, sees Sydney. Stu says they can go upstairs in his parents' room. So they go upstairs, they go to chit chat. And they're talking, and Sydney decides that she wants to have sex. So in the same time that she's having sex, Randy is going over the rules that one must abide by in order to survive a horror movie. And the number one rule is you can never have sex. That's why the virgins always win. They outsmart the killers, because their minds aren't clouded with sex. Number 2 is you can't drink or ever do drugs, as they're all drinking and clacking beers and having a good time. And number 3, one thing you can never do is say, "I'll be right back," because you won't be back. And this dude gets up and says he's going to get another beer. Do you want one? Randy says, sure. And he says, "I'll be right back." And he falls in the back of the door. So he's having a good time with this. At this point, we cut back to Sydney. She's having a conversation with Billy on the bed because they're done with their sexual activity. And she's still kind of making hints that maybe he is the killer. And he's like, "I don't know what I have to do to convince you I'm not a killer." As Ghostface comes in and stabs him in the stomach a bunch of times. He falls over. Sydney runs away. So Sydney is now trying to get out of the house. It's a big chase scene. It's elaborate. As you know with Scream, all their chase scenes are extremely elaborate. And at this point, if I can go back a second, before that happens, Randy answers a phone call that says the principal had died and he was gutted and hanging from a goalpost. So all the extra people at the party want to go see this, and they take off and leave. So then when Sydney's doing her chase scene, there's not as many people there or nobody noticing what's going on because there's no one really there. They chase her up and down. She goes upstairs. She locks herself in this room. She goes out on a roof, and she gets kind of thrown off onto a boat. When she falls off of the boat, she runs to the cameraman's vehicle, and he lets her in. He's napping. So her and Kenny are watching the feed, and on the feed we can see Randy sitting there on the couch all alone watching Halloween saying, "Look out behind you, look out behind you." And in this same scene we have the killer behind Randy who's not looking behind him. And when the killer looks like he's going to go ahead and kill Randy, we hear Sydney scream. So when they're watching this, it's 30 seconds delayed. They see it. The cameraman goes to go see what the hell happened here. He sees the door open. He looks back at the camera to try to see where Ghostface went. He turns around. He comes back. And his throat's slit. And he dies. So Kenny the cameraman is dead. So when Sidney escapes from the back of the van, we then see Gale and Dewey come back. Dewey goes into the house. Gale goes over to the truck. She finds blood in the truck. Then Randy runs up on her. She gets freaked out. She punches him in the face. She gets in the van to drive away. And Kenny slides down the windshield. So then she does this real fast, sharp turn to throw his ass off the windshield. And he smashes into a fence. And as she's trying to drive away, all freaked out, scared, Sidney runs out in front of her. And she drives down a hill, crashes right into a tree. So, Gale Weathers is gone. Or is she? We'll never know. So after this, Sidney's running back to the house. Dewey comes out, and he's got a knife in his back, and he falls to the ground. Ghostface pulls the knife out of his back, chases after her, and she runs into the police car, and she's trying to figure out how to start it, and the keys are in Ghostface's hand, so she can. Then we see some locks going up and down, and he pops open the trunk slowly and sneaks in there. She escapes. As she's running back, she grabs the gun from Dewey's holster. And when she turns around, she has Stu and she has Randy both coming at her. And they're both pleading that the other one is the killer. And she can't figure out who it is, so she ends up saying, "Fuck you both," and slams the door in their face. As she slams the door in her face, we see Billy start to work his way out of the bedroom, and he falls down the stairs. In the most unfriendly way of falling downstairs, if you were going to do it. She checks on him to see if he's okay. He takes the gun because he says, "I need to get out of there." And as he opens the door, Randy comes running in and he shuts the door. And Randy says, "Stu's the killer. We got to get out of here." Stu's gone mad. And then Billy says, "We all go a little mad sometimes," and shoots him in the chest. And Randy goes flying back and through a table. Then we get a nice little monologue on how that's kind of a Norman Bates thing and how he used pigs or corn syrup, same thing he used for pig's blood and Carrie. And that, surprise, he's a killer. And she goes to run away. She runs into Stu, and surprise, Stu's a killer. So in this whodunit, we have Billy and Stu, who are the two killers. Which, if you're watching this movie as it goes along and you don't know how it ends, I feel like this is one of the easier ones to guess, because Billy looks like a killer throughout most of this movie. And maybe that's because I already know who it is and I rewatched it. And I've rewatched it millions of times. Probably not millions, but I've probably seen this movie at least 20 goddamn times. And it's hard to not see that they would be the killer. And Stu's not in the movie a lot. He's kind of must be off doing his own stuff. But he's the lighthearted character, and he always kind of has like these dickish, asshole-ish things that he says in key spots, and he always has this kind of weird thing about him to where it's like, I bet he's a killer. So I don't think the whodunit in this one was very good, but it was fun, especially for 1996. We hadn't had really a whodunit in a while, or especially in a horror movie in a long time. And we get this big monologue on how they were the ones who killed her mother. And Billy wanted to do that because her mother was screwing his dad, and that's what made his mom leave. So he wanted to do justice there. Stu's just going along with it because he doesn't know any better. Then Stu goes and pulls her dad out. Her dad never made it to that trip because they plan on pitting the entire killing spree on her dad, who came back 1 year after his wife's death and killed everybody, including his daughter. Which, whatever you're trying to pull off. Got it. But it worked when they killed his mom, when they killed Sidney's mom, so she blamed Cotton Weary. But then when they go to get the gun to do some killing, the gun's missing. And Gale has the gun, and she cocks it back, and as she goes to shoot him, nothing happens. And she gets kicked into a pillar. Because she had the safety on. And she didn't know that. So Billy makes fun of her. Then he puts the gun to her head And Stu turns around and says, "You're going to want to see this," and there's no one there to say that too. So, oh shit, now we got another problem. So then they go inside, they have to go look for Sydney. And the phone rings. It's Sydney on the phone, telling him she called the cops and asking him all these stupid questions to be an asshole. And Billy's freaking out. Stu's bleeding out because him and Billy played a little game called Let's Stab Each Other to make it look like the dad actually hurt us. And when he gets on the phone, he asks her if she really called the cops, and she says yes. She asks him what his motive's going to be. He said peer pressure. Billy grabs the phone again. Billy gets pissed, whips the phone, hits him in the head. Stu has a funny line, "You hit me with the phone, dick." And then when she gets on the phone again, he asks, "Did you really call the police?" And she says yes. And then he cries that his mom and dad are going to be so mad at him. So in this movie, Matthew Lillard is a little over the top, but I think that's what makes it good. He's that yin to the yang. Billy is so super serious and an asshole-ish kind of the entire movie that you gotta have that fun character to go alongside it, or else it's not really believable. So Billy's looking for her. She ends up stabbing him in the chest with an umbrella twice while wearing the Scream mask. And then when she goes to run away, Stu comes after her, tackles her. They kind of have a little scuffle on the ground. She hits him in the head with a pot and drops the TV on and electrocutes him. So Stu Macher is dead. As far as we know, he has not came back for any sequels up to this point. So then Billy attacks her again. She ends up shoving her finger in the hole where she stabbed him with the umbrella. And he reaches back to stab her with the knife, and when she does, he gets shot in the chest. Boom! From Gale, because she didn't forget the safety that time, bitch. So he's laying down and he kind of looks like he dies. Randy gets up because Randy wasn't dying in this movie. He's a virgin. So they're all standing there, and Randy explains to him that this is the point in the movie where the supposed killer comes back to life for one last scare. He goes for the one last scare. Sydney shoots him right between the eyes, right in the brain. And he's dead. She says, not her movie. And it ends. We see the police show up. We see Dewey carted away on a stretcher, and he gives a thumbs up. So he got stabbed right in the dead center of the back and the spine, but he's still alive. And Gale's going to end the movie by shooting a news report. Looking like she got the shit beat out of her and just surviving a murder series. So, whatever floats your boat, Gale. So, overall, Scream, great movie. There's not much you could say about it. I mean, they're on their 6th movie coming out here in a couple of weeks. It's been a popular series. Wes Craven directed the first 4 before he passed away, and then the 5th one was finally directed and put out in 2022. Just like the one where one Scream came out, Scream 2 came out like less than a year later. This one's coming out a year later again. The characters are memorable. The lines are memorable. It's quotable. It changed how horror movies were made. We were allowed to poke fun at the tropes of horror movies, and these movies allowed you to mention actual horror movies in them, as to where prior to that, you didn't really mention horror movies in a movie. People weren't like, yeah, I watched Halloween and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. That never really happened, but they did that for this one to make it more realistic in real life. And that's the best part about this movie, is the killers are realistic. Yes, they were kind of easy to tell in this one, but that doesn't... You still could have thought maybe it was some other people along the way, but as you kind of dwindled down the number of people in it, you had to figure out who it was. My overall rating for this movie, I give this one a 5 out of 5. Like I said, when I was a kid, I loved this movie. I watched it so damn much I could almost quote the entire thing. Now as an adult, I cannot quote it as much anymore, but it still has very memorable spots in it, things that I like, things that I remember. The opening kill is still one of the best openings in horror movie history. The ending is done very, very well. Lots of blood, lots of gore in that sense. The one thing I do wish this movie had more of was inventive kills. There is a lot of stabbing people with the same damn knife over and over again. And unfortunately, that is kind of a trope for Scream, is they do a lot of stabbing with knives throughout this entire series. Not the most inventive in kills for series, but as that being the only downfall in the movie, it's still not bad because at least when they use it in this one, the killing is still visceral to really pack a punch. Alright, so next week I'll be doing a review on Scream 2. We're going to be doing one a week up until the new one comes out, and then doing a new one the weekend that it does come out. If I can have you give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, maybe what your memory of Scream is, or where this one ranks in the rest of them for you. Don't forget to share this with anybody who might want to watch it as well. And until the next one, guys, rest in peace.